Sierra Talbot didn't mean to spill an entire tray of champagne down the front of a woman's designer gown, especially not in the middle of a five-star rooftop restaurant overlooking Manhattan at golden hour. "Oh my God, you clumsy idiot!" the woman shrieked, jumping to her feet as the entire table gasped, crystals from her clutch scattered to the floor like raindrops. "I'm so sorry." Sierra fumbled for the linen napkin tucked into her apron, panic tightening in her chest. I wasn't looking. You think that makes it okay?" the woman snapped, glaring. "This dress costs more than your entire yearly salary." A sharp voice interrupted, low and calm. "That's enough, Vanessa." Sierra looked up and nearly dropped the napkin. The man across the table rose slowly, his gaze locked on the furious woman. Tall, clean-cut, charcoal suit, a jawline sharp enough to cut through tension. Yarden Grant, she recognized him instantly, not from tabloids, though he'd been in them. No, she knew him from the restaurant. Yarden came in twice a month, always polite, always quiet. Never flashy, but the Rolex on his wrist and the sleek black town car he arrived in said enough. He was a millionaire. Maybe more. Vanessa's expression twisted. "Excuse me," I said. "That's enough." Yarden's voice didn't rise, but it didn't need to. It carried weight. "You've insulted her enough, and you've embarrassed yourself." Vanessa's face went red. "You're actually taking the waitress's side. I'm canceling the rest of the evening." He turned to Sierra. "Are you okay?" She blinked. Yeah, I'm fine." Vanessa scoffed, grabbed her sequined clutch, and stormed off, leaving the scent of expensive perfume and bitterness in her wake. Yarden looked at Sierra again. "Did she hurt your hand?" She glanced down at her wrist where Vanessa had shoved her, a faint red mark. "I've had worse." "You shouldn't have to." He looked toward the maitre d', who hovered nearby, unsure what to do. "Cancel my reservation." "I'm done here." Sierra stepped back. "I'm really sorry, don't be." He picked up his overcoat and hesitated. "Do you have a break?" She blinked. "What? You're clearly having a rough shift, and I just lost a dinner date. Maybe we can fix both problems at once." "You want to eat with me?" She stared. "Like as in sit down for a meal," he said. "Not in uniform and not here." She hesitated, heart stammering. "I'm not dressed for. I'll wait. You can change. You deserve a break." Sierra didn't know what made her say yes. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, like she wasn't invisible. Or maybe it was the fact that her life had been stuck in the same cycle of double shifts and overdue rent for too long. She changed into jeans and a navy blouse she kept in her locker, pulled her curls up, wiped off her makeup smudges, and found him waiting outside, coat draped over one arm, holding 2 coffees. "You drink coffee at night?" she asked, surprised. He smiled slightly. "Only when I'm trying to stay awake for something interesting." They walked down the street to a quiet Italian place tucked between a bookstore and a wine shop. It was intimate, candlelit, and the hostess greeted him by name. "How do you know about this place?" she asked once they were seated. "I like places that don't scream money," he said. "Places where you can actually hear someone talk," she laughed. "Is that rare for you? You'd be surprised." Over shared pasta and soft music they talked, really talked, about everything, her love for sketching. His frustration with shallow people who only saw his bank account. She didn't ask how much money he had, but she didn't need to. It was in the way the staff treated him, in the way doors opened without him asking, and yet he never acted like it mattered. "You're not what I expected," she said, sipping her wine. "Is that a good thing?" "I think so, but I'm still wondering why you asked me to dinner." Yarden looked at her for a long moment. "You didn't flinch when she said something cruel. You didn't cower. You stayed calm." She shrugged. "I've dealt with worse. And you didn't treat me like I was important. You treated me like a person." He leaned in. "That doesn't happen to me often." She felt the heat rise to her cheeks. "Well, you are a person," he smiled. "You'd be surprised how many people forget that." They lingered over dessert tiramisu. He insisted she try, and when he walked her back to the restaurant, she had to force herself not to hope for more. "This was nice," she said awkwardly. "It was," he agreed. "And if you're open to it, I'd like to see you again." "You mean like a real date," he said. "With no spilled champagne this time," she laughed. "I don't know, that might be my signature move," he grinned. "Then I'll wear a raincoat." He handed her a small card, no number. Just his name. Call the number on the back if you decide I'm worth a second dinner, he said. Then he stepped into a sleek black car, and just like that, he was gone. Sierra stood on the sidewalk holding the card, heart racing. She had no idea that by stepping into that dinner, she'd stepped into something so much bigger. And she definitely didn't know he'd fall for her. Sierra didn't call right away. The card sat untouched on her dresser for 3 days, tucked beneath her sketchbook where she could pretend it didn't exist. Every time she reached for a pencil, her fingers grazed the thick cream-colored paper embossed with only 2 words, Yarden Grant. She wasn't afraid exactly. But something about the way he'd looked at her, like he saw past everything worn down and exhausted in her, left her unsettled. Men didn't usually look at her that way, not without wanting something in return. Her roommate, Leela, noticed her hesitation the second she caught Sierra staring at the card again over breakfast. "If you're not going to call him, at least give me the card so I can sell it on eBay," Leela said, dumping cereal into a chipped bowl. "You know how many women would kill for a shot at Yarden Grant. I'm not interested in being someone's project," Sierra muttered. "Maybe he's not trying to fix you," Leila said. "Maybe he just liked spending time with you." Sierra didn't answer. She didn't know how to explain the ache in her chest when she thought about his eyes, steady, unreadable, but not unkind. She didn't know how to explain the quiet part of her that missed him, despite having only spent 1 evening in his world. By the end of the week, she'd decided to call. Not because she expected anything, but because regret tasted worse than fear. The number led to a personal assistant who arranged a car to pick her up the next evening. No details, just a time and a location. It felt absurd, like she was agreeing to meet a ghost in a fairy tale. But when the car pulled up a sleek silver Bentley with tinted windows, she climbed in without asking questions. The driver didn't speak. Just handed her a small envelope the moment she settled into the back seat. Inside was a single folded note, written in neat, slanted script. "I thought I'd show you something real this time. YG." They drove beyond the city, past the skyline's glittering edge, until the buildings thinned and the air shifted. She rolled down the window slightly, catching the scent of pine and something faintly smoky. When the car finally stopped, it was in front of a wide iron gate, opening slowly to reveal a winding driveway lined with copper lanterns. At the end stood a restored farmhouse wrapped in ivy, its windows glowing with warm light. Yarden stood on the porch in a dark sweater and jeans, his hair tousled by the wind. "You came," he said, stepping down the stairs. "I wasn't sure I would," she admitted, eyes scanning the place. "This is yours," he nodded. "Just a place I come to when the city feels like too much. No one but my assistant knows it exists. Why show me?" "Because I wanted you to see me without the noise." She followed him inside. The house smelled of cedar and citrus, and the walls were lined with black and white photographs. Some framed, some pinned casually, like he hadn't bothered to pretend the place was for anyone but himself. "Are these yours?" she asked, pausing beside a cluster of photos, street corners in Paris, an old man playing chess, a dancer mid-spin on a rooftop. "Photography's always been a thing for me," he said, "but it's easier to be taken seriously when your hobby is collecting yachts." Sierra tilted her head. "You don't seem like the yacht type." "I'm not, but people like assumptions." "Makes life simpler for them." He led her to the kitchen, where a bottle of wine and 2 mismatched glasses waited on the counter. "I didn't cook," he said, "but I did bribe someone into dropping off food from that Thai place you mentioned." Her eyebrows lifted. "You remembered that?" "Of course I did." They ate in the sunroom, plates balanced on their knees, the windows open to the night air. Crickets hummed outside. It felt impossibly far from the life Sierra knew, the cracked walls of her apartment, the rattle of the subway under her bedroom window. "I used to think money meant peace," Yarden said suddenly. "That once I had enough, everything would get quieter, but it doesn't. It just gets louder in different ways." She studied him. "So why stay in it?" "Because walking away doesn't undo it. I tried. Once." "What happened?" "My brother died," he said quietly. "I inherited everything. I didn't want it, but he'd built something. I couldn't let it rot." She didn't ask for details. The grief in his voice didn't want questions. It wanted silence, so she gave him that. After a while, he leaned back, looking at her. "You're not what I expected," he said. "Neither are you." "I keep thinking about that night," he said. "Not just the chaos, but you. The way you didn't shrink." "I don't shrink for people who throw tantrums in designer heels," she said, setting down her wine. "But I do freeze when people with private farmhouses invite me into their lives like it's normal." He laughed, and it was the first time she saw a crack in his carefully controlled exterior. "I don't invite people here, ever." "Then why me?" "Because I'm tired of curated people." "And because you didn't ask me for anything." "I didn't know there was anything to ask for." "That's exactly why I trust you." They sat in silence again, but it wasn't awkward. It was the kind that settled in when something unspoken had shifted. "I don't want to be your escape," she said finally. "You're not," he said. "You're the first real thing I've felt in a long time." She didn't know what to say to that, so she stood, walked to the window, and stared out into the night. "I don't do things halfway," she said. "Neither do I." She turned. "If this is going to turn into something, I need honesty. No games, no secrets." "Then let me be clear." He stood, crossing the room, stopping just short of her. "I want you, not just for tonight, not just for distraction. I want to know what makes you laugh, what keeps you up at night. I want to see what your world looks like, because mine feels empty without something real in it." Sierra's breath caught, not because of the words, but because of the way he said them with certainty, not charm. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The way she leaned into his touch when he brushed a curl behind her ear said enough. The next time Sierra saw Yarden, he was standing beside a gleaming black Steinway grand piano in a stark modern gallery uptown, his suit jacket slung over one shoulder, hair damp from the rain outside. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said as she stepped inside, shaking droplets from her coat. "I said I would," she replied, eyeing the angular sculptures and oversized canvases lining the walls. "You really own this place? I fund it," he said, slipping his jacket onto a nearby chair. "The artists rotate monthly. Tonight's a preview before the opening. I wanted you to see it before everyone else does." She scanned the room. "You really don't do small gestures, do you?" "I don't believe in halfway impressions." He gestured toward a painting in the far corner. Harsh reds and fractured lines pressed together in chaotic tension. "That one reminded me of you." Sierra blinked. "That doesn't sound flattering." "It is," he said. "It's not easy to look at, but you can't look away either." Her cheeks flushed, but she didn't look down. "You said you didn't do curated people. This whole place feels curated." "Not for show," he said. "For survival." They moved through the gallery in silence for a while, the low hum of distant traffic filtering through the tall windows. When they reached a narrow hallway filled with black and white portraits, she stopped in front of one. A boy, maybe 10 years old, was caught mid-laugh, a soccer ball under one arm, dirt streaking his cheek. "Your brother?" she asked. Yarden nodded. "Illy." She didn't ask how he died. The way Yarden stared at the photo told her enough. Instead, she reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I used to paint," she said quietly. "Not for long. My mom sold my easel when rent got tight. I never got another one." He looked at her. "Do you miss it?" "I miss what it felt like. I don't know if I'd even be any good now." "Would it matter?" She didn't answer. Later, over dinner in a back room set with only 2 place settings and a single flickering candle, Yarden poured wine into her glass and leaned back in his chair. "I want to ask you something," he said, "and I don't want you to say yes to be polite. That's ominous. I have to fly to London tomorrow for 3 nights. A gallery there is finalizing a partnership with an orphanage I sponsor. It's a lot of long dinners and public appearances with people who care more about headlines than kids. I hate it. And you want me to come? I want someone real next to me. I want you." She stared at him. "You barely know me." "I know how I feel when I'm with you." "That's enough. I don't have a passport. You do now." He pulled a slim envelope from his inner pocket and passed it across the table. Inside was a crisp navy blue passport with her name embossed in gold. "You forged a government document?" she asked, brows lifting. "I paid a legal team to expedite it. I also had someone track down your birth certificate. You're terrifyingly efficient. I'm also hoping you'll say yes." She narrowed her eyes. "What would I even wear?" "I took the liberty of sending your measurements to a stylist in Mayfair." You'll land to a full wardrobe. That's slightly insane, I'm aware. Sierra looked down at the wineglass, then back at him. I've never left the country. Then let London be the start. She hesitated, heart thudding. People will talk. I'm not a socialite. I don't know how to be. Whatever this is. I don't want a socialite. I want you exactly how you are. She couldn't breathe for a moment, then she nodded once. Okay, but if I fall off a yacht or insult royalty, you're responsible. No yachts, he said, and no royalty. Just art, charity, and me. By the next evening, she was aboard his private jet, staring out the window at the dark expanse of ocean below. The cabin was quiet, the seats plush and wide, the air scented faintly with bergamot and leather. Yarden sat across from her, a stack of documents spread across his lap, glasses low on his nose. He looked up and caught her watching, regretting it yet, still debating if I'm dreaming. He set the papers aside and leaned forward. What do you want out of this, Sierra? She swallowed. I don't know. I've never been given anything like this before. I keep expecting the catch. There isn't one. Then why me? Because you make me feel like the noise in my head isn't permanent. She didn't know what to say to that, so she reached across the table and touched his hand. When they landed, it was nearly dawn in London. A sleek town car waited by the tarmac. It whisked them through sleeping streets to a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the Thames. The stylist arrived within the hour, followed by a hairdresser, a tailor, and an assistant with a printed itinerary. Sierra tried on a navy silk gown for the first dinner, the fabric whispering against her skin. When she stepped into the hall, Yarden was already waiting in a tuxedo that looked like it was made for him. He turned as she approached and went still. You look like trouble, he said. Good trouble, the kind I'd cross oceans for. They arrived at the gala in a vintage Rolls-Royce, flashbulbs exploding as they stepped onto the red carpet. She looped her arm through his, forcing herself to smile as cameras shouted their names. Inside, the room glowed with crystal chandeliers and polished marble. Waiters moved like shadows and a string quartet played near the fountain. Every woman wore couture. Every man spoke with practiced charm. Sierra felt like an intruder. But when Yarden leaned in and whispered, "You're the only person here who matters," the panic loosened its grip. At the head table, a woman in pearls leaned toward Sierra. "And you are?" she asked, lips pursed. "His date," Sierra said simply. "Of course." "And what do you do, dear?" Yarden cut in before she could answer. "She creates, and she's brilliant at it." Sierra blinked but didn't argue. Something in his tone made her believe it. When they returned to the penthouse that night, she kicked off her heels and curled onto the velvet couch while he loosened his tie. "You handled that well," he said. "I faked it like my life depended on it." "I could tell, but no one else could," she smiled at him. "You really think I'm brilliant? I know you are. I've known since the moment you didn't flinch." She stood and walked toward him, stopping inches away. "I'm scared," she said. "Of what? Of what happens if I fall?" "Then I'll catch you," he said, voice rough. "Every time." And this time, when he kissed her, she didn't hold anything back. The third night in London brought a charity dinner held in an elaborate glass atrium strung with floating lanterns and filled with a curated crowd of aristocrats, tech moguls, and legacy wealth. Sierra wore a sleek black gown with an open back, her curls swept into an elegant twist. She'd grown used to the rhythm of these events, the way people hovered, assessing each other with practiced smiles, but that didn't mean she liked it. Yarden, standing beside her in a crisp tailored jacket, leaned slightly and said, "This one will be brief, I promise." "How brief is brief?" she asked under her breath. "We'll make it through the main course, then I'll pretend to get a business call. Convenient how often your company needs you when your patience wears thin." "They need me constantly," he replied, eyes scanning the room. "But tonight, I just want to get you out of here." Before she could respond, a man approached their table, a lean figure with sharp cheekbones and a voice that pushed too hard. "Grant," he said, offering a hand. "Didn't think I'd see you here after the Berlin withdrawal." Yarden's expression cooled. "A change in priority. Ah, and this must be the new priority." The man turned his gaze to Sierra. "You're not one of the usual imports. Where'd he find you?" Sierra's spine stiffened. Yarden didn't blink. She's not an acquisition, Marcus. Relax, just making conversation, Sierra cut in. Then maybe try asking my name instead of where I was sourced. Marcus gave an oily laugh. Fair enough, and what do you do, miss? Talbot, I'm an illustrator. Ah. So a creative type. He said it like a diagnosis. Yarden placed a hand lightly on the small of her back. We'll catch up later, he said flatly. They left without waiting for dessert. In the car, Sierra folded her arms. Does that happen often? More than I'd like. He looked over. You handled it better than I would have. I'm not here to impress your peers. I don't need you to. I only care what you think of me. She turned to him. Then tell me something true, something you've never told them. He hesitated. I didn't speak at Ellie's funeral. I stood there with every camera in my face and I couldn't say a word. She watched him closely, because it hurt too much, because I was angry. He took risks I told him not to. I hated that he didn't listen. And then I hated myself for hating him. Sierra reached across the seat and touched his hand. Grief doesn't run on logic. He looked at her, his voice low. You make things quieter in my head. That night they didn't go back to the penthouse. Instead, he drove them to a private garden on the edge of the city, unlocked with a single brass key from his pocket. The space was silent, ivy-wrapped, with a shallow pond reflecting the moonlight in perfect stillness. I used to come here with Ellie when we were kids, Yarden said. Before anything cost something, Sierra wandered to the edge of the water. It's beautiful, he stepped behind her. So are you, she turned. You don't have to keep saying things like that. I'm not trying to win you with compliments. I'm trying to make sure you hear the truth before you forget it again. She looked up at him. I haven't forgotten, I just don't know how to believe I deserve this. His voice dropped. Then let me prove it. The next morning, the flight back to New York was quiet but not tense. Sierra sketched in a notebook he'd slipped into her bag unasked. Thoughtful, and Yarden fielded calls with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking French and German with equal ease. But every time their eyes met, something passed between them, a certainty unspoken and solid. Back in the city, the world resumed its noise. Yarden was pulled into meetings and boardroom negotiations. Sierra returned to the restaurant where nothing had changed except her. She didn't tell anyone where she'd been. She didn't need to. But 2 weeks later, she arrived home to find her building wrapped in scaffolding and a fire escape ladder blocking her front door. Inside, Leela sat cross-legged on the floor, grinning like a lunatic. You need to sit down, Leela said. I just climbed 5 flights. I'm already down. Leela handed her a letter. Heavy parchment, embossed initials. Sierra opened it and read. It was a gallery invitation with her name listed as the featured artist. She stared. This isn't real. He bought the space for one night, Leela said. He called me last week. Said he saw your sketches and wanted the world to see them too. Sierra's heart thudded. He went through my stuff. No, Leela said. I showed him. Because someone had to. The night of the show, she stood in a room filled with her work sketches of city streets, quiet moments, faces caught in laughter or sorrow. People wandered through with glasses of wine, murmuring softly, but she barely noticed them. Yarden stood in the center of the room, waiting. When she reached him, he didn't speak right away. Just looked at her the way he had that first night, like she wasn't invisible, like she mattered. I didn't do this to impress you, he said. I did it because I wanted you to see yourself the way I do. She blinked against the sting in her eyes. You've done more for me in a month than anyone in my life ever has. He stepped closer. Then let me give you the one thing I've never given anyone. She shook her head. You've already given me too much. No, he said. Not yet. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring, simple, elegant, a single stone set in a band that shimmered under the lights. I'm not asking you to change for me. I'm asking you to keep being exactly who you are with me, every day. Forever, Sierra's breath caught. This is crazy, I know, but so is pretending I could ever want a life that doesn't include you. She looked at the ring, then at him, and everything fell quiet. The gallery, the city, the past that had always loomed too large. She nodded once. Yes. When he slid the ring onto her finger, the room erupted in applause. She didn't notice who clapped or who watched. All she saw was Yarden, eyes steady, hands warm, heart open. He'd fallen for her when she stepped in without thinking. And now she was choosing to stay with full intention. The morning light spilled through the penthouse windows in golden sheets, casting soft warmth across the hardwood floors. Sierra stood wrapped in a silk robe by the open balcony doors, the city humming far below. The ring on her finger felt almost weightless, but its meaning anchored her more than anything else ever had. Behind her, Yarden was on the phone, his voice low but firm. "No press release. I don't want this turned into a headline. This isn't about publicity, it's personal." He paused. "Yes, I'm sure. No interviews, no photos." Sierra turned slightly. "You're canceling the announcement." He ended the call and crossed to her. "I don't want this turned into something it's not. What we have doesn't need an audience. I thought you had investors who like to know when their CEO gets engaged. They'll know when I send out the wedding invitations," he said, brushing a kiss against her temple. "Until then, I want to keep this ours." She rested her head on his chest for a moment, letting the steady beat of his heart center her. "I've been thinking about something." He waited, patient as always. "I want to quit the restaurant," she said. "Not because of you. Not because I'm suddenly living in a penthouse, but because I'm done scraping by. I want to put everything into art. I want to really try to build a life that doesn't start with waiting tables and end with aching feet." His eyes met hers. "Then do it. I'll support whatever you need: space, materials, time." "I don't want your money," she said gently. "I just want the space to breathe." "I'm not offering money," he said. "I'm offering belief." That night they hosted a small dinner in the garden of Yarden's farmhouse, the one he'd once said no one but his assistant knew about. Now it had been transformed with long wooden tables under flowering vines, strings of soft lights, and candles nestled in glass jars. The guest list was short: Leela, a few close friends of Sierra's, and a couple of Yarden's oldest confidants. Leela raised her glass during dessert. "To Sierra and Yarden, may your love be as ridiculous and over the top as this entire week has been." Sierra laughed as Yarden leaned in. "You know she's going to bring that up at every holiday dinner for the rest of our lives." "I'm okay with that," Sierra murmured, sliding her hand into his, "as long as we get to have those dinners." Weeks passed, then months. Summer faded into autumn, and Sierra moved her things into the penthouse, though she insisted on keeping her sketchbooks in the sunroom, where the light was best. Yarden, true to his word, never tried to change her world, only expand it. He helped her find a loft studio downtown, a space with exposed brick and tall windows, and she spent her days there, sketching, painting, experimenting. He came by in the early evenings sometimes, always with something in hand: a new brush set, a cup of that obscure Turkish coffee she liked, a book of poetry he thought would inspire her. He never hovered. He just existed beside her, steady and quiet and entirely hers. One crisp November morning, Sierra stood in the studio doorway, arms crossed, as she watched Yarden pace with a mug in hand. "You're nervous," she said. "I'm not," he said, pausing. "Okay, I am. I don't do well with ceremonies." "You once negotiated a merger with a man who owned half of Northern Europe," she reminded him. "This is just a wedding." "Yes, but that man didn't cry during his vows," he said dryly. "I've never even written vows before." "Then don't write them," she said, walking to him. "Just speak from your heart. It's always been enough." The ceremony took place in a conservatory just outside the city, surrounded by glass walls and tall trees dressed in late autumn gold. Sierra wore a simple ivory dress, her curls loose, and Yarden wore a dark suit tailored so perfectly it looked like he was born in it. They stood hand in hand beneath a canopy of climbing roses, the air cool and fragrant. There were no photographers, no reporters, no audience beyond the people who mattered. When it was time to speak, Yarden took both her hands and looked at her like she was gravity. "I never believed in fate," he said. "But then you spilled champagne on someone who deserved it, and I knew right then that my life was about to change. You cracked something open in me. You made me want things I'd given up on. You made me want a future that had a name and a face." "Yours?" Sierra's voice trembled, but she didn't look away. "You met me when I had nothing but a pair of worn shoes and a coffee addiction. You never tried to fix me, you just saw me, and that was the beginning of everything. You gave me room to dream again." And somehow, you're still the only thing I don't want to draw because I could never capture what you make me feel." They kissed to the sound of quiet applause and rustling leaves. Afterward, they danced barefoot on the dewy grass, surrounded by laughter and candlelight. Leela cried. One of Yarden's oldest friends, a stoic man named Adrian, toasted them with a poem he'd written on the plane. The night melted into slow music and stolen glances, and nothing else in the world mattered. Years later, Sierra's work hung in galleries across several countries. She kept her studio, never letting it turn into a showroom. She taught workshops twice a year, mostly to young artists who couldn't afford much, and she always left the door open on Tuesdays for anyone who wanted to sketch in silence. Yarden continued to run his empire, though he worked fewer hours now. He preferred to spend his mornings reading beside her and his evenings cooking elaborate meals he insisted were stress relief. They traveled often, but always returned to the farmhouse on weekends. It became their anchor, the place they fled to when the world got loud again. One spring afternoon, Sierra sat on the porch of the farmhouse, sketchbook in her lap as Yarden approached with 2 glasses of lemonade. "You know," he said, setting a glass beside her, "I think I finally figured out how to describe you." She raised an eyebrow. "I thought I was indescribable." "You are," he said, sitting beside her, "but you're also the quiet after the storm. Not silence, but peace." She smiled, leaned into his side, and handed him the sketchbook. Inside was a drawing of the farmhouse porch the dog they'd adopted 2 winters ago, and a tiny pair of shoes tucked beneath the swing, his hand stilled on the page. "You're sure?" he asked softly. She nodded. "We're going to be parents." He looked up at her with a wonder he couldn't hide. "You've just made everything I've ever built finally mean something." They sat there, wrapped in the kind of silence that needed no words, watching the sun dip below the trees. It wasn't a perfect life. It was better, it was theirs, forever.